I'm Kristi York Wooten, and this is the Sweet Song Podcast, where we talk about your favorite songs and the artists who write them. On this episode, Corinne Drewery and Andy Connell from Swing Out Sister. Welcome to the Sweet Song Podcast. I'm Kristi York Wooten, and today I'm super excited to have some of my favorite artists of all time, Swing Out Sister. Andy Connell and Corinne Drewery are here today to talk to me about a box set that's coming out. It's called Shades of Limelight. It's an 8 CD box set coming out on Cherry Records later in June. And we're here to talk about a lot of that stuff and about their career and what they've been up to lately. So welcome, Andy and Corinne. It's so great to see you.
Thanks for having us.
You found fame fairly instantly, with It's Better to Travel and all of this and Breakout. And then, at the time, it seemed like it was a long period of time between like 1987 and 1994. But looking back, that period seems so brief. And then you were still having radio hits and success. But I feel like you are some of those artists that gave yourself the freedom from record companies or whatever to just keep doing exactly what you do. And that's why I think this is a wilderness period, because you were still exploring. You weren't boxed in by trying to produce an album or produce material that just some guy told you to make, you know what I mean? So I think that stands out, especially from the time period that it's in. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that wilderness concept.
Well, it's funny you should coin that phrase, because Andy also refers to it as that. And it was kind of like we were out of the limelight, and hence the title of the box set. We were kind of in the shadows a bit, but in a way that's when the most interesting things happen. The pressure was off. We had a little more time to explore. We weren't even sure if we had a record deal some of the times these albums were being made. So we really went to town and delved a bit deeper and went to places we hadn't been. We maybe revisited similar inspirations. The inspiration always comes from the same place, but we were able to delve deeper while no one was watching.
What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Some part of me, I love the idea that somehow we freed ourselves from the constraints of the record companies, as if, we won that battle. It was, they were happy to free us. It was them freeing us. It wasn't a master plan on our part. But I suppose, yes, you're free of the constraint of somebody wanting something from you in a particular way that you probably want to move away from. But at the same time, I try to paint that in a positive light, but I would have liked a little bit more people asking something of us. It was a brief period, but I think things have changed. Once you don't have to deliver what somebody else, you're always in that balancing act. And I think that if I miss something, it's the idea that, that kind of Brill Street thing, where somebody's writing, not to order, but they've got a brief. We have to do this. When somebody might be thinking, I want to do my orchestral suite, but we've got to write this 3-minute pop song. And the best 3-minute pop song comes from that. Part of me, we wouldn't have done those little 3-minute things that I think work really well if we hadn't had somebody breathing down our neck saying, no, don't do that, do this. The first box and the second box, they go in completely different directions. One is, the shackles are off, you can go where you like. And there's a huge amount to be said for that. But equally, sometimes that constraint can be a powerful creative thing.
No, but that's interesting to me, because it's also the way I see it is when I'm listening to the music that's represented on this box set, I feel the freedom there. And I wouldn't say that I would have felt constraints on the earlier material. You can tell obviously the sense of what was popular production at the time, just in terms of some of the compressions or some of the way the sounds are done is of its moment. But I think that, I definitely feel the freedom in this. So I want to get to some specific songs in a minute. But one thing I did want to say, one thing that Swing Out Sister does better than pretty much anyone is I feel like you have an unwavering commitment to your vision, whether that's under the constraints or in a wilderness period of freedom. I mean, you're your own genre. I've always said this, but like, there's never a moment when you're not you, or when there was anything that sounded anything other than you all. And to me, that's brave. Very few artists. I feel like you're unrelenting in that way. And that's what makes it so good. And so it really doesn't matter if it's your early period or if it's this middle period or when it is, it's all the same quality and to me, the same vision.
Well, I thank you for that. That's a very nice thought. I think, again, I get the sense of what you're saying, because I think we always had the thing that people would say, "Oh, that's so you," you know, whatever we did, they'd say that's so you. And I think I used to joke about it. I think an awful lot of what is so us is the sound of Corinne, and on occasion I wanted to do a Bachman Turner Overdrive cover just to see, because I thought let's go down some completely wrong road and then put Corinne on the top, and then people would say, "Oh, that's so swing up," because it just colors everything we do. I could do a heavy metal record and put Corinne on the top. That's you know, it's the sound of it. But I do think that's true. I think it's there's an unwavering, just sort of stubbornness crops up a lot when I try and describe things, but just it's probably not bending to something. And I think I think the longevity is a clue to that, because I think we shouldn't still be doing this. It's an awfully long time, and I think we just don't waver in terms of what we're trying to do. And even if it's sometimes we question in ourselves what we're trying to do, I think we still have the arrogance, if you like, to know that we can do it. What we're trying to do, we can do it the best. So we should do that, you know.
Well, you describe it as arrogance. I describe it as courage. But also, you kind of just don't care, do you? I mean, you're going to go make something beautiful and great. And seriously.
I'm describing it as arrogance, tongue in cheek, really. But I do think sometimes you know, what you perceive as courage sometimes is just somebody not knowing what the rules are. You know that thing with somebody's either brave or foolish, and I think we're never really sure if we're brave or foolish.
Do you have a song called that? If not, then you could.
We should. Corinne, get writing that one.
Foolish.
I think another thing, though, is it's probably sincerity. And I don't think we could lie if we tried. I think the truth comes through when we get together writing a song. I think it seems very apparent if we're not being ourselves. They're the ones. Andy wouldn't like it if I sang something that wasn't true to myself. I wouldn't like it if he hadn't created the music that just felt straight from the heart. I don't think it's just my voice that makes it sound like us, Andy. I beg to differ. I think it's a combination of things, and a lot of our albums contain instrumental tracks because it wasn't just because I was being lazy or I couldn't think of anything to sing. I'm actually sometimes quite overwhelmed by the music Andy writes and the arrangements. Sometimes I don't want to spoil it. And I think it's when we come together, it's just this combination of things that makes us sound like us.
I agree. And of course, Corinne, you have a singular voice that is very special. I do agree that it's that kind of whole recipe. And I wanted to just go back to what you said about sincerity, because I think that's what struck me about it, remembering the first times that I heard you all and seeing you on MTV and being a teenager, you know, seeing your videos and thinking, having a visual connection to it too. First of all, ended up being an art major in college and all of that, and design. It's very much like with you, Corinne, but something appealed, not just, oh, that's cute or they look cool, but I could feel that sincerity, even in something like the Breakout video from you guys. It was so in line with the way I was feeling about how I wanted to present myself, and sonically how I would want to present myself. Not to mention I was a choir nerd, so Corinne sings exactly in my range. You don't want to hear me do it, but like, I can sing with you like nobody's business, exactly in the same range. So when all these, especially the first couple of albums, I was like, it's not like I wanted to be you or create music that sounds like that. It was like you had already created everything that was in my mind, and you were this voice that was representing the way I saw myself at the time. So I think the sincerity is what played that role. It was that sonic and visual connection, but that the sincerity really came through. So I'm glad that you said that.
Who said that? Who said that famous line, sincerity about sincerity? That's the main thing you need. If you can fake that, you've got it made.
I think there are a lot of people trying to fake it. That's for sure.
But I think there was, you know, at that time, if we go back and think about it, when we were starting to do things, I think where that comes from is not having an idea that we were going to be anything. You know, in terms of people have dreams of being, especially nowadays, people dream they're going to be a star and they're going to be on things. We were very much going to be an art house project when we first got together. And for some reason, we had a single that sounded great on the radio, and that was that. But we were never destined to be, in our minds, we were never destined to be that. We were going to be some
Speak for
sideways.
yourself, Andy. I think
Well, this is the thing. This is the thing. You see, there's always that little dichotomy, isn't there? You never know. But certainly, from my point of view, there wasn't a, we weren't being groomed for anything. So it kind of, in hindsight, all those things look very natural and unthought about, and really considered as to what the goal was. And I think if there is sincerity, I think that's it. It's a lack of pretense. It's a lack of artifice, if you like, because we just weren't really prepared for that. And Corinne, of course, secretly was.
No, I wasn't really, but I think I also agree. We didn't have the attitude. I think around the time we were starting out, there were a lot of bands, and well, there always has been, and the attitude is more than the music. And I think we didn't really know what attitude to have, so we just were ourselves. But I think I definitely thought we were going to go somewhere, Andy, because all I'd ever wanted to do was to jump in the back of a tour bus and travel around the world. I mean, it kind of sounds like the dark ages now, but I'd seen a film called Summer Holiday when I was about 3 years old, 2 years old. It was probably about when I was born. And this is Cliff Richard. He was like England's version of Elvis, jumping around singing We're All Going on a Summer Holiday, and the young ones going all over the world. And I thought, we're going to travel. And then I'd seen the picture of the Supremes on the steps of, I can't remember what the airline was, but they were flying off somewhere with their airline bags. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do.
You see, if we could have toured in a London bus, I would have done
that. Who would have been driving?
You mentioned the Supremes, and I wrote a note here because one of the other things that attracted me to your music and continues to do so, I inherited my mom's records. Of course, my mom is still with us, but when I was little, she just gave me all her fives, and a lot of them were soul records from the late 50s, and the Platters and all kinds of things, Ink Spots and Platters. But those records, I would play those for my friends because they felt like new records to me. Oh, my mom, found these at my grandma's house and I'm playing them. But what you guys did is a similar thing of kind of merging, I feel like, a lot of those best sounds of the 60s with the modern, whatever was modern at the time of whatever record was coming out. And that was another way that I was viewing music too. So, I mean, your music is very soulful, I think, but you also got, Brazilian sounds. You're influenced by a lot of different things. How did you kind of come to this idea of what that sound would be? Did it just come out like that? And if so, what were those key influences that made that happen?
I think it's a strange thing, actually, because people tag you with a kind of retro, they give you that tag, and it's a very limiting, from their point of view, it's very limiting because they see it as, oh, you're just reproducing something from the past, which is true. But I think what you're doing is taking the valuable things from something and trying to breathe life into them, to keep them continuing. And I think of it as, the Fuji ethos of what they do with the cameras now, where it's like the filters and everything to try and make things that remind you of when you were on the beach with your dad in the summer, when you were little. And there's this whole idea of a nostalgic thing, which it can seem unhealthy, it can feel unhealthy, but I think what you're trying to do is capture magic. And most of the magic that you have, to me at least, is childhood, because while you're a child, things are magical. You're open to the idea of magical things, and I think we close once we start being cool and we start making decisions, rational decisions. That magic disappears, and I think anybody who's doing anything creative, I think, is trying to get that magic where the sun comes in, and it just that moment that you'd capture. It's a very rich source of doing that, going into your childhood memories, the good ones. And we've always done that, and I think nobody has the same ones, but we know what it feels like. We all know what that magical thing is. So when we got together, Martin and I and Corinne, was really trying to find the pool. Where should we look? Where are we looking? And we've said this before, but John Barry was the place we all met at, because for various reasons, and he'd done things that interested me, just knocked me out. The Bond things, various soundtracks. He'd done Shirley Bassey, he came from different directions to that place. And that was a very central thing for us, certainly on the first few records. And it never went away. And I think it's always been soundtracks. It's always been film, not just soundtracks, but the glorious, because film is a place you can capture that thing I'm talking about, that childhood sunlit moment, film is the other place where that exists. Good films, anyway. So it's not a surprise. That's where we go. Those are the places we go.
You asked where we started when we were trying to get all those influences to meet. And really, we were just jumping into it blindly. We didn't really know each other when we first got together. So we were kind of scrabbling around, like Andy said, trying to find common ground. But I remember Andy saying, well, what kind of music do you like? And I said, well, Northern Soul, which was like all the US imports that people had found, in the bargain bins and just rare stuff that people had discarded and they didn't want anymore. But it was the feeling and the sound, and to capture that mood. Martin came from another place, and Andy had got this kind of West Coast jazz thing going on, and I was going, I can't pronounce the names of any of the people you like. I've never heard of them. So it was kind of good to go into it blindly, because we all had something completely different going on in our heads, our expectations of what we would come up with to make a song. In fact, we all wrote our contributions in different places a lot of the time, and then brought them all together, and it's a surprise. It's kind of quite surprising that we actually got anything finished.
Well, I did want to say too, one thing that Andy said a second ago on the sort of the magic, like you were talking about childhood memories, but magic and sunshine. So I feel like magic and sunshine is literally another way to just describe swing houses. I mean, that's
just write all our songs now.
Yeah. I'll just put these two words together and start. No, but so let's talk about this, because when I saw this box set was coming out, and then, of course, I know all those records, but you have the records as they exist in your mind, all the albums, and you don't really think of them necessarily linearly. So to have them on a list with the track listing in chronological order for this box set, so starting with The Living Return in 94, so many of these songs, I think everything is a hit. When I go back and listen, I'm a Billboard person, so I know what was really a hit, but I'm like, was that a hit? Was that a hit? Like I keep going like every song, and that's because I know them so well through the album. Yeah. But they all could have been hits, most of them. If you had kind of like your time capsule of each one of these records and you could pick one or two tracks, I think we should go through and talk about some of those records if we could.
Well, that's going to be fun, because I've always had a problem with chronology, just not in terms of this, but just generally. It's like what happened in 1973. I don't know. What happened 2 years ago? I don't know. So for me, it would be an interesting experience, because I have that thing, the Kurt Vonnegut thing, where you get moments of your life, like when you were 9 and then you're 64 and he never knows, it's a blur. And all of this is very much, when we were listening through to the songs, I have no idea during that 10-year span which ones go where, which I think is a nice, probably that's kind of a creative place, because you don't tie yourself down to this is the way it was. So you can imagine it, but I have no sense of which one belongs with which other one. So good luck with that. I'm not going to know.
In some ways that's good, but also it's because when we've done live performances, we've tended to scatter and mix a few things in from all the different albums, so we don't leave any of them out. And it's always a challenge to make them fit together. So we've changed the styles of some of them, or we've segued and done mashups of some of them. So it's kind of quite a surprise to us to listen back and hear them as they were when we recorded them, because we've changed them a lot of times.
When I'm looking at a body of work like this, I kind of arrange it in terms of melodies. There's ones with the indelible hooks that just get you and you remember them. And there's others that are just totally arranged in my head by mood. I think you guys that's another element of Swing Out Sister. Obviously, the previous box set had the word mood in it. But I think, do you think of it that way? Do you think of them as moods?
I think of them as colors, which I suppose are moods. It's different frequencies. And when we've been trying to put the songs in order in albums in the past, you've just reminded me of this. I get some coloured bits of paper or some coloured pens, and I write out the colours, so there's not one colour. Each song has a different colour, and maybe we've only got 3 or 4 colours to choose from, but the songs have to go in a sequence that the colours aren't next to each other. Like Andy would probably do it and he said, oh, they've got to be, we can't have two songs of the same key next to each other, or two songs that have any similar words in the title next to each other. But mine is colours. This song makes me think of orange, this song makes me think of magenta, this song makes me think of violet. So it's like there has to be an array of colours spread out evenly. And I think those colours do reflect the moods of the songs.
That's fascinating. Would you call that synesthesia, or would you just call that the way you arrange the sounds and the color that you feel or see?
Yeah, it's not quite synesthesia, but I think I'm verging on.
Verging on the synesthesic.
Let's start with somewhere in the world, though, because I think that is, I don't know.
Sorry.
I just want to start with that one. So I don't even have anything specific to ask. I just want you all to dump on me and tell me what color it is. Tell me where it kind of fits in the panel.
Okay, well, I'm not I'm going to guess what color it is, and Corinne's going to tell me now.
Are you going to tell me first, or I'm telling you?
I've got a color in my head.
I think it's yellow.
You see, I had kind of gold. Yeah.
It's similar shade. Well, somewhere in the world, we were in Swan Yard Studios, and I think we had been absorbing a lot of Jimmy Webb, Magic Garden and Fifth Dimension, and that album, Shapes and Patterns, had lots of vocal arrangements. We did a lot of experimentation. We had a great band of vocalists to work with and an arranger called Frank Campbell, who was a former priest, and so he was taking us to the highest heights, heavenly heights, with some of his arrangements. But somewhere in the world, I think that was the happiest moment on that album. It was happiness happening. And I think that's just what we wanted it to feel like. I mean, and I think from the first line, like a stranger's smile that lasts for a while, I think I'd been walking down the street one day and somebody smiled and I smiled back. And it's just such a lovely feeling. You just think nobody has to say anything. It doesn't mean anything other than we are both members of the human race and we're just exchanging an acknowledgement on a lovely sunny day. And that's where the song started for me.
That's another thing that I like about Swing Out Sisters, because I feel like so much songwriting or books or anything that people write, literary lyrics, whatever, a lot of it, especially film, a lot of them come from trauma or bad places, or there's a lot of things that come out of those situations. Very few people are writing about those moments that are just glimmers. I guess you would call them glimmers nowadays. That's a buzzword. I think that's what a lot of these songs are glimmers, because you are taking inspiration from a moment that might have just been in passing, or even light that was passing by.
It was one of those magical moments, like Andy said, that I was capturing, but that was actually in the present. It was happening not in childhood. It's just like, isn't this amazing when people smile? It costs nothing. It doesn't mean anything other than you're happy, they're happy. And especially when kids smile, I think if kids have still got room for a smile in their lives, it's like, whoa, chokes me up. I just think that little child knows how to communicate. It's a lovely thing. But we also made the video for that in Miami. We had a great time making it, and the sun was shining. Everyone was happy.
On a more prosaic note, I always thought we should have pitched that to FedEx or Amazon or someone. You know, somewhere in the world, someone's thinking of you.
Delta. There, right?
No, I can picture the video, you know, like the delivery man bringing a gift to somebody.
There's still
Never
time
happened.
for that. There is still time for that, I promise. One of the things, too, that people maybe don't know you for, which is kind of these love ballads or slightly melancholic, daydreamy ballads. And I wanted to talk about Now You're Not Here, because that's another song that is, you know, part of this compilation.
That had a very odd gestation, really. It's probably the oddest of anything we've ever done, because we did a tour in Japan, and then the record company wanted us to do a song for a TV drama, they're called in Japan. They're like the daytime soap, but quite dark issued. And so they said, would we do this song? And so we stayed in Tokyo and recorded with Japanese musicians, and Paul O'Duffy came over to produce. So it was a very detached, you know, being in the studio in Tokyo. It was a fantastic experience, but you know, you don't have your usual creature comforts and your way of working. So it was a very interesting place to be. And I think the song went through quite a few different versions before we arrived at the. It was one in six. Well, in fact, that album, the Big Elsewhere album, which is in the box, is kind of a compendium of all of the various places we tried to go with that song before we settled on the last one. So it's from my point of view, it's interesting to hear the things we were trying to do and where we ended. But yeah, I mean, lyrically, I think we'd have to pass over to Corinne on that one.
Well, I really wanted it to have the feel of the look of love. And we did, in fact, ask Dusty Springfield if she fancied singing this song, because it was going to be a theme tune for a TV drama. It was kind of late on in her life, but we just thought this would be the perfect song for her, and how wonderful to have someone we love singing the song. But unfortunately she couldn't record it, and I think the spirit of her is in the song. The feel of the look of love and Dusty's voice, to me, was part of the inspiration. But also, like many of our songs, I kind of was imagining this could be some kind of a Bond theme.
You will do it one day. We will.
You don't want to do it now, though. I mean,
Bond died. He died in the movie, didn't he?
well, he died. Yeah, but to be honest, you don't want to do one now. There was
We
a
wanted
time
to do it then.
It was the golden age when all the people were alive that were doing it. You mentioned Japan a second ago too, so we have to talk about Filth and Dreams and kind of, first of all, the aesthetics of Japan and the Japanese audiences, and how you began traveling there and released this record, because a lot of people may not know that story.
Well, the odd thing with that record is it's the least Japanese of our albums, I would say, because it's very dark and claustrophobic, and the Japanese audience tended to be, they like the shinier things, the more uplifting things. And I think Filth and Dreams is, although I love the intensity of it, but it's not necessarily a record that would garner you much mainstream attention. But no, the Japanese thing has been really a lifeline for us in terms of, as you rightly pointed out, I thought kind of quite cruelly pointed out, these are our wilderness years, and we're not getting any attention from anybody at this point. And I think there is, much as you try to pretend that is okay, everybody needs feedback. You don't do something in a vacuum. Of course, you want people to appreciate it. It doesn't have to be many, but some. And I think we were missing that. We were missing just somebody telling us this is good, this is bad, it doesn't matter. And the Japanese audience embraced us at a time, I think, when we really needed that. And they have impeccable taste, so it's not surprising that happened. But no, but there were all kinds of, not to get too much into it, but there was reasons culturally and economically, and all manner of things were going on at that time. And I think we fitted simply put, I think there was a change in Japan where young women were becoming career women, which they'd not been allowed to do in previous generations. So I think as that change happened and the salarymen kind of took a back seat and young career women started to come through, they could see, they wanted something of their own, and they embraced, amongst other things, they embraced us, the idea of us. And I think it was to do with it was perceived as a sophisticated thing and a cool thing, but also because Corinne was clearly the leader of it. She was in charge. And somebody pointed out to me, one of the Japanese interpreters said, "Is Corinne slightly taller than you?" in a very embarrassed way. And I think that, as daft as that sounds, I think it was significant. I think young Japanese, not exclusively, but there was a big audience for us there that we didn't see coming, just due to the way that society had changed. And they were the most loyal audience we ever had. In that TV drama, I always say this because I'm kind of proud of it. The TV drama, the song that we did, Now You're Not Here, sold more copies in Japan than Breakout sold in the world. That's a stat that I keep repeating because it gives me solace when people say, "Oh, you had your one hit." I'm thinking, well, no, actually. So statistically, that's quite a thing.
And we were awarded a Japanese Grammy for Now You're Not Here as domestic artists, not international artists, because it sold so well in Japan, on the domestic market. So we were kind of welcomed with open arms to Japan as theirs, because this record had done so well. But also, I think that's what afforded us the freedom to make an album like Filth and Dreams and for it to be accepted in Japan, even though this is not magic and sunshine, it was more shadows and a little bit eerie for us, a little bit on the sinister side. Although we thought it was sunny, you know, in our British climate, but in places. But it was exploring, I don't know, just a slightly more melancholy side, and it was a more intimate, less produced sound. So it was quite different. But if you talk about the wilderness years, when we first went to Japan, I think it was apparent that Japan welcomes, and the Japanese are such loyal listeners. I think they have afforded many artists a continuation of their musical career throughout their wilderness years, because when we first went to record shops in Japan, and this is when CDs were first becoming popular, I once had to buy 3 suitcases to bring back the stuff we bought, the re-releases, the stuff that people hadn't put out anywhere else in the world. You know, stuff from Herbie Hancock, Marvin Gaye. I can't even think of all the names, but we just found so much stuff that was not available anywhere else in the world. And I think that's because when the Japanese people like you, they want to hear everything you've done. They're not going for the highs and lows. The more obscure, the better. You know, they kind of, they stick with you.
Well, I mean, as far as that album goes, Filth and Dreams, I like the sound of it. I mean, in fact, I don't want to say it's hip hop, but there's a couple of rhythms in there that are a little more raw. And there's, like you said, there's sometimes a melancholy, you know, a little lines that are kind of loosely sung and in the title track and all of that. So you're right, Andy, that it's not the Japanese aesthetic, but that's interesting that that's the one that was out there. I'm going to open up my phone because I'm going to prove that you're not a one-hit band, because as you know, I keep my grocery store Shazam log so that every time I hear you guys in the store, I'm down. And I think my most recent, I'm not sure if I Shazammed it or I think I filmed myself in the grocery store singing it. I mean, Somewhere in the World is one of the ones that does pop up in the grocery store all the time. It does.
It's just that one is perceived to be so much bigger because we were a victim in the sense of the success of that one, because it can't help but dwarf other achievements. But having said that, we're forever grateful that it came along.
When we first started out and we were interviewed, I wasn't really well versed in being interviewed and didn't really know what to say. And I don't know if it was the New Musical Express. One interviewer asked, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years' time?" And I said, "I don't mind if we're heard in supermarkets or elevators or in the bargain bin." Elevator music was the worst you could possibly be called, and we had been called that as an insult. And I just thought, easy listening elevator music is some of the most complex stuff ever. And I just thought, I don't mind. I'll be happy when we're everywhere, because that's where all my favorite music is right now.
Well, and yeah, I mean, and it does strike me, and we've been talking about this probably for over a decade. I have talked about this with you guys about hearing you in the wild, like in a store or in a restaurant, is such an amazing feeling. Even though I'm not the artist, to have your favorite song come on when you're in a place like that. I mean, it just does put a spring in your step.
I love it. I've always loved it. It's the best thing. It's just, you know, because you're looking around to see if somebody's playing a trick. It's like, is this happening? Every time it gets me, and I thoroughly enjoy it every single time.
We were actually once in a hotel lobby just about to go into breakfast on tour in Japan, and there was a kind of lounge version of Twilight World that had been re-recorded, sort of library music stars have played throughout the hotel, as we were just going into breakfast, and who should be sitting in there but Alice Cooper, who was also on tour in Japan. I thought, this is a weird coming together of different worlds, because I used to love Alice Cooper when I was about 14, and there's one of my heroes having breakfast without full makeup on, and here's one of our songs being elevated to elevator music playing through the sound system. It's like a very strange moment.
I do want to get to Where Our Love Grows, because this album came out at kind of a weird time. Like I know that there was 9/11 and there was things that were happening in the couple of years after that. And I was listening to albums and tapes and obviously CDs, but this one came out right when my daughter was a toddler, a small child, and having a CD and being able to listen to music in the car when you're running the mom errands all day and stuff like that. So that record became kind of a companion to me during those years because it was my car buddy, you know. But there were other things happening at that time in the world too. I mean, we were just only a few years, still about 5 years outside of when Napster came along and everything was being upheaval. We weren't quite in the full streaming age yet, but we were in the MP3 era. But let's talk a little bit about that album and what it was like to make it. And then obviously some of those songs are my favorites as well of all time. So
it's an odd one, that one. I didn't think, going into it, I didn't think we had enough material, which now when I listen to it seems absurd because we did. I think of certain ones. I think you go in and you have an idea, a vague notion of what you're going to do. Like Somewhere Deep in the Night, I think we had, because we went skiing, the three of us. All of a sudden we had the thing, you know, because it was such a mind-blowing experience on this mountain for a few days, and we came back and we had, somehow the sound was there. We knew what the sound should be on that record, and the songs would come because we knew we could hear the music already. But with this one, I think it's probably as blank a canvas as we ever had in terms of why we're coming in today on a Monday morning. What is it we're trying to achieve here? And there's something hard to quantify about it, but there's a lack of art. It just feels very clean. It feels like it was the cleanest transfer we ever had from what was in us to what the sound is. And I think there was a process in that we'd started on the previous record where we would make the track and then dismantle the substructure of it, because it was too obvious. You know, like we'd have a rhythm track and bass and everything, and then once we got the vocals and the ethereal parts, we would remove the framework. So on a couple of those songs, I feel like they kind of hang in the air a little bit. They sort of hover in a way that you couldn't have put together without having the thing that you took out. So I think I get the feeling we would, when we continue to do things, that we'll probably do more of that, in the sense of taking things away from the structure. And I don't know what that means in real terms.
It's almost like Kill Your Darlings. I think Andy always is very tough when we're writing songs, and I might be clinging to a particular line I want to keep, or a little bit of melody that's perhaps superfluous. And Andy's very tough at just clearing out all the stuff that we don't really need. It's a bit like decluttering your mind or your house. Just stick to the things that really stand out, that really bring you joy. And I think once we've done that, then you can put some things back in. You can have fun building around that, but you have to make the bare bones really strong, make the foundations strong, and then you've got something strong to build upon. But I think that one is the same thing, wanting to recapture the magic and sunshine of a certain era. But I don't think we were going quite so far back with that one. It was maybe the things that we had chosen for our magic and sunshine. And I think you can hear some Michel Legrand kind of sort of more cinematic in a different way. I think we were trying to capture moments in our more recent past and bring them into the future, like Andy said before. I mean, you said also about Filth and Dreams, there are traces of hip hop. There's always been some rhythms, or we're like magpies, anything that's going around, if it's acid house, if it's hip hop, trip hop, you know, just, I mean, in a lot of those places, a lot of those genres of music have been referring back to stuff that we have been referring back to in the first place, but it's someone else's interpretation. So it's kind of interesting to play around with the timeline of someone else's reference or your own original reference. And, you know, it's like doing one giant crossword in a way. And then you just got to keep a straight, simple line in your head, because you've got to sing the song. And sometimes you don't have all those accoutrements when you go on tour. When you break it down to the bare bones again, that's what we have to do when you do it live. You pick the strongest, simplest thing out, which is really the melody, and the most inviting things to make it live.
I think that's a good point, though, when you were saying about bits of hip hop and bits of acid, whatever it might be, and bits of nostalgia and bits of anything. I think that's the thing. It feels like if you steal everything, we steal a little bit of everything, or use a little bit of everything, And I think sometimes, certainly in our things, and I think with a lot of people, when you steal from one place too much, or you use from one place and too much, then it's a problem because you're slavish. Then you're becoming reverent to something rather than just look everywhere and steal the good bits of everything. It's like cooking.
And then you put them together in your own way.
Yeah, and then you get order out.
But we got to get some. I want to get some song talk in here on this record, though, because I mean, I'm just looking at this list. Love Won't Let You Down, Where Our Love Grows. I mean, Let the Stars Shine.
Is When the Laughter Is Over on that one?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I do like that one. I like that. No, I mean I like them all. I love them all, of course. We honestly thought Love Won't Let You Down. We were convinced that would do well as I'm still kind of surprised. You should never be surprised, but I thought that would. It sounded great on the radio. I heard it on the radio a couple of times, and I thought that's a radio. It has to be a radio hit. And no, it wasn't for various reasons. It wasn't promoted right and whatever else. But I just thought that deserved better as a single.
And I had a secret passion for it to be a hit in the football stadia, because I just think, this could be great to sing. Whoa. I could just hear that resounding around a stadium, not necessarily us performing it, but a whole load of voices singing it, or maybe one of the American college marching bands. It's kind of a melody that just makes you want to sing out.
No, great songs on that record for sure. Love Won't Let You Down. I mean, all of those are so good.
Oh, I've just got one more song to mention on there, which is particularly applicable stateside. I was flicking through the internet one time, and When the Laughter Is Over came up as a song very popular. It was in their top 30 or something with the Chicago Steppers. I don't know if you're familiar with them. That dance craze around Chicago where they all get really dressed up to the nines and they have dance competitions. It's a kind of underground dance scene that's peculiar to Chicago, but I'm sure there's different ones everywhere. But there was a guy teaching his little girl to dance Chicago stepper style to When the Laughter Is Over, and I felt secretly very proud. I thought, wow. And we actually performed in Chicago. I said, are there any steppers in the house? And there were. So I was very
We didn't do that. I can't fathom that at all. How can you dance to that?
In a very Chicago stepper-like style.
Well,
I mean,
I'm curious.
It's tricky. It's almost tango-esque in some of the moves they do. And the costumes are all part of it as well. And I noticed one couple dancing, because then I got glued, you disappear down a rabbit hole. And there's a couple dancing that looks like a man and a woman. And whilst dancing to When the Laughter Is Over, they managed to change their outfits. So the man became the woman and the woman became the man.
Okay.
You hear about these American bands, especially rock bands. They don't talk to each other. They just go play the show on stage. Then they all go to a different place. They don't even get within 5 feet of each other. I can mention a couple of British bands that do that as well. Definitely you two being together, in your private lives and in your public lives and your musical partnership, I think has everything to do with the music as well, or the music has a lot to do with that. I think that it goes back to the sincerity thing. You're not writing about yourself. You're not writing about your lives necessarily, but it comes through in there. I mean, I think the partnership element, and then I want you to give shout outs to all your great musicians who are part of your little gang and family that are.
No, I'm not prepared to do that. No, I mean, I think what you're saying is true, but at the same time, bear in mind that Corinne and I are sitting in the same house and we've demanded to do this interview in separate rooms. So that gives you a little inkling into the way things are.
On your rider.
Feet of each other.
No, I think you have to have that. I don't think I can quite understand you say the bands going around hating each other, doing it for the money. But I think the reality of the situation is it's the only money you're likely to get these days. If you want to have a career doing this and you're a band of a certain age, you better be on the road, because that's the only place you're going to, pay the bills. Bands that, I'm certainly not, they have my sympathy, people, because you have to do that. It's, I'm sure they'd rather not be in a room of, the people that they hate. It's the nature of the business now, isn't it? That's the only ticket there is, so. But yeah, our band we've been enormously fortunate actually with the people we work with, that they've been as loyal as they have, and supportive of what has been, not always the easiest road, honestly. We try and, like you say, the records tend to be err on the positive side, but it's sometimes that's, those people who seem positive and they're laughing through the tears, but there've been moments like that. But I think that the people we have been, I don't think we'd have persevered if it had become a workaday experience. We just get whoever in and we find some people and we go and do the show. I don't think we'd be interested enough to pursue that. We do it because we love being in the room with the people we have been in a room with for so long. So we're very fortunate. So you want me to say some names now, I suppose, and then they'll hear this, and I'm going to, I won't be happy about that. Anyway, Tim Cansfield, guitar. Gina Foster, vocals. Not backing vocals, vocals. Jodie Linscott, all manner of things that get hit. Too many to mention.
It's a bit of a musical merry-go-round because sometimes people are in different places doing their own thing. So we don't always have exactly the same band. We kind of, we mix and match sometimes. And that's where it gets interesting because we adapt the songs to fit with different people, or they all have their own things to bring. And some of them have appeared on the records. On The Living Return, for instance, we had Mikey Wilson and Roy, and we had Sylvia Mason-James and Erica Harold, and they bring a completely different sound. So then we move on to the other albums. I mean, there's different people. Andy,
I'll tell you what I like though. John Thurkel, who's playing with us, we just played in Japan with him earlier this year. Played trumpet on the original version of Breakout. So that's how long are we talking there? 38 years, something, 40, nearly.
Almost
40.
So,
he won't go away.
And he's still on the road with us. But it depends. Sometimes we have a horn section, sometimes we don't. We've worked with Noel Langley and Snaky Davis, and they play.
There's a cast of thousands.
Flute and saxophone. I mean, it'll get us into trouble because we're going to forget somebody here,
Of course,
and there's too many people to mention.
Yeah, no, I was thinking I had scribbled down, Tim, Gina, and Jody, off of top of mind. But no, just the idea that it is kind of like a family of players, and it is a little bit like a merry-go-round, and that's great because I think it's fresh and people bring different things, and a lot of them go off and play with others or sing with others and do things and bring that back.
Well, this has become more and more of an issue. Yeah, they do. The more it's almost, they're good at what they do, so they're in demand, and I hate that. I need to change that.
Well, this is my last question, which I always do on the podcast because it's the Sweet Song podcast, and you can pick anything. Let's pick something from the box set, but you have to have your one sweet song. It doesn't have to be your favorite, it doesn't have to be the one you're most proud of, but whatever is just your sweet song. When you hear it, that's your song.
And one of ours.
Yours.
Oh.
Can I go first?
Please.
I'm just going to say Mama Didn't Raise No Fool, because this is a big hint. This is from the album The Living Return. And I love that song. It was actually the title came about because I just heard it on a news bulletin in America, and I'd never heard that phrase before, and I just liked it. And it became kind of an ode to mums and single mums and, the determination that mothers have to go through bringing up their kids. But we don't play it very often because the guys say there's far too many chords.
They're right.
It's the one that I always want to do. So we have to find a way of simplifying it. Come on, Andy. That's a hint.
No, it's a ridiculously difficult song, that. Could take 6 months or so.
Okay, what's your sweet song, Andy?
Well, can I have an instrumental?
Sure.
Does it have to be instrumental? Do you need it to be a song?
You can have an instrumental.
There's one particular piece on Somewhere Deep in the Night. It's called Vital Thing Take B. And it actually was the first, it was actually Take A, but we went with the other one as the main version. But mainly because it's what I was saying before, we had a structure. And then Nigel Hitchcock, who's a remarkable saxophone player, who played on Get in Touch with Yourself many years ago, came in, and we wanted him to just play a little bit over the top. And it didn't have a theme, this piece, so we just kind of let him do a thing. So Paul was setting the microphone up, and we were doing a mic check. So we said to Nigel, could you just play along just so we can balance the sound? So sure. So he starts doing the thing, and after about a minute, Paul and I and Corinne were sitting in the other room, and we started to look at each other, and we thought, this is Did you happen to have the tape on? It turned out he had the Paul always puts the tape on before the takes. So he'd happened to switch it on just in case. So we caught this and we thought, after about a minute or two, we thought, oh, isn't it a shame? Because it goes to this other section near the end and he's not going to know that it changes, which is a pity because it's been wonderful so far. And he got to the section we thought would throw him and he somehow knew where it was. He had this sixth sense of where it might go. Maybe the harmonic things just told him. We listened back to it and it felt like he'd led all the way. He was listening to the piece and playing along with it. When we listened to it back, it was him leading and us following him somehow. I don't know how on earth he managed it, but anyway. So we did the proper version, and that was very nice. But this one is magical. This is one of those things I was talking about, where I don't know where that came from, and everything that we do underneath him sounds like it's the most perfectly judged thing, which of course it wasn't. The whole thing was an accident, but it sounds so intentional. It sounds like we really knew what we were doing, and it kind of sums up to me the accidental just wonderfulness of it. Something magical happened that day, and that's really, for me, what it's all about. That's me done.
Thank you. That's a great story.
Can I just say one quick
course, yeah.
thing, which somebody who really became the third member of the band is Paul O'Duffy, who we really couldn't have made all of these albums without, because the first one, The Living Return, we had a little break from Paul. We worked with Ray Hayden. We tried out some different stuff, but we came back to Paul, and I think it just felt right. It was so good to go away and come back again, because we realized what makes us work musically. His patience, his determination. He can be a real pain sometimes, and his bullying and his tormenting, all these things that he did to extract the best performances out of Andy and myself, and the perseverance and patience. And he's a very musical guy. He started off picked by the record company to find us some commercial success and give us shiny pop productions. But by this time, it becomes apparent he's gone over to the other side. He's come over to our side. And that's probably why this was our slightly under the radar years. But he really got to understand the way we worked. And really, that's where he was coming from all along. But he had initially been brought in to get us a pop hit, which he did. But his training, he'd worked with his older brother, who was a producer who'd worked on people like Fifth Dimension and Rod Stewart, Barbra Streisand, I can't remember who else, but some of the classics of the 70s, really, maybe late 60s. He was his much older brother, so we can't forget Paul O'Duffy.
None of this would have happened without him, and none of it would have happened with another producer. He's a very, very unique. You don't say very unique. He can't be very unique, can you? But he's a unique presence in the studio, and none of this would have come out the same way or anything close if he wasn't involved. And I think we have taken him for granted over the years, not because we don't value his, but we're so used to him being there and relying on him. And he's like the third presence that we sit here and talk about what we do, the two of us, and don't mention him because he's everybody. You must be aware. It's the sound of the three of us. It always has been. So the fact that we don't talk about him means that we just acknowledge he's ever present. He's in all of this music. Corinne's right. We should have him in capital letters in everything we say about it, because it's all, at least a third of it is him. So yes, very good point. I would have been unhappy if you.
It was very funny, actually. Paul was once asked to give a description of what it was like working with Andy and myself. And we're thinking, what's he going to say? And he went very abstract and philosophical. And he said, well, if you can imagine, Corinne is like a kite flying out of the window, and Andy is sitting indoors with the curtains closed. And I somehow have to make them talk to each other.
Yeah, it's true.
You have to open a window so that
But then it makes the curtains blow.
Well, thank you for that. It's been so lovely to catch up with you all about the new
It's been a long time.
Certain Shades of Limelight, so 8 CD box set. I believe it's June 27th when it comes out on Cherry Red. And so many people are fans of Cherry Red now, putting out amazing compilations and things from fabulous artists. But thank you again.